Hi, my name is Duck. I'm one of the administrators here at footermentors.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at something called BBCode, otherwise known as shortcode. It is a markup language that is used throughout the forum to enhance the written text. If you want to add like bold or italic text within your post, or if you want to create headings, or subdivide sections with bullet points or numerical lists. This is something that you can actively use in your posts to add those qualities. So BBCode, like it says, is a form of markup language, but it's a little bit more specialized, where HTML uses angle brackets, BBCode is going to use square brackets. And it goes a little bit beyond HTML code, because BBCode can also work as a way of creating a template. All right. So for example, we're all familiar with HTML code with the angle brackets. And you see our first example, we have the opening code for bold text, which is the angle brackets with the letter B. We put in our text, and then we close the bracket with a backslash letter B within the angle brackets, and that's going to give us a bold text. BBCode works in a slightly similar way for most standard HTML modifications, with a few exceptions, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So for BBCode, you can see that the only difference between the HTML and the BBCode is the use of the square brackets. So if you put the opening code square bracket B, put your text, close the code with backslash B in the square brackets, that will also give you bold text. What the forum software is doing is it's looking for that short code and saying, okay, everything between these two brackets, I'm going to make it bold. Okay. So what is BBCode? Like we said, it's a form of shorthand formatting that the software uses for post creation. It goes simply beyond the markup, because it can also work as a form of a template for more complex markups. All right, so for example, here we have the standard BBCode for inserting a video into your post. The BB video is the short code in square brackets, and the equal sign, and then you have the sections here that in gray would be text or information that you, the user, would put in to give a little bit more of information to the BBCode. Typically, anything that requires an equal sign requires some kind of user input on your part. All right, and then we have a short code here, or a reminder that this is going to be a URL, and then we have the closing BB video. When the forum formats this, it turns it into usable HTML. So we see that we have the open bracket, the angle bracket in this case, and it's going to be an anchor with a H reference to the URL, which you inserted here in the BBCode. The class and the data video, and the numbers 1 and 2 will be the height or the width and height settings for the video, and then where it's going if you click on it, and where it's going to send you, which is the URL, and then we close the anchor. So all of this HTML is written for you just by you using that little short code with those three little pieces of information that you provide. Okay. The problem is that not all HTML code can be converted to short code. All right. It's very forum specific. So if you're familiar with short code in one particular forum, it doesn't necessarily mean that the same short code is going to work with us. There are some similarities, the more common ones like bold, underscore, italicize, Those tend to be pretty much set across the board, but we do have some very specific ones that allow you to format the text, because we're a photography forum. We rely on pictures. We can format text to be on one or the other side of your images, depending on how you want to set it up. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So there are three types of BBCode available to you here on Fundamentoris. All right, and each three are handled a little bit differently by you when you are formatting your post. The first is a straightforward, simple replacement code where you have an opening code and a closing code, and then your text in between, nothing else. All right, so an example would be like if you want to change something to a bold text. You simply put it with the square bracket B, put whatever text you want to be in bold, and then you close that bracket with a \B in the square brackets, and you're done. You continue typing, okay? The second version is what is called a modifiable code. This is code that requires an additional bit of information from you in order for the forum to render it properly. And these are typically identified where it needs, where it has equal marks. It means that you need to provide some kind of information after that equal mark in order to process it properly. And I'll get into the nuances with the real live demonstration once we flip over to the website. I just want you to get an understanding of the types now. All right, a good example would be if you want to change your text to a different color. In this case, we have the color short code with the equal signs, and then you have to type in what color you want to change the text to. And in this case, we're changing it to red, but it can be any color that you want. Red, blue, green, yellow, pink, teal, gray, any of the standard CSS codes or HTML color codes, and those are easy to find on the internet. Just do a little Google search. Then you put in your bracketed text, and then of course the closing code, which would be with the \color and the square brackets. That tells the forum that, hey, everything between this code, the opening code and the closing code, I want that changed to red. Okay. The last one's a little bit more unique. It's a little bit, requires a little bit more of an understanding of coding in general. And they tend to be what's called a nested code. And this is where you have your opening code that sets a precedent. And then you have your text within its own code. And then you have a closing code to the original opening code. And a prime example of this is if you want to create a bulleted list. The opening code is list. By default, it's going to create a bullet list. And then you have an asterisk in the square brackets. And this one here is a little bit unique where you don't need a closing bracket on the end of the text. The BBCode understands that this is going to be a list item. And every list item will start off with the bracketed asterisk. So you can have as many bullet points as you want. And then when you're finished with your list, you go ahead and close that list item with the \list. Okay? And just like HTML, you can nest a list within a list and we'll actually indent it for you. Just make sure you follow the proper format where you open up a new list before you close your original list, and it'll embed it. Okay? All right, so let's go over to the website and see what this looks like in actual use. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down to the classroom here. No, actually, let's go to the meeting room, general discussion. I'm going to put a new topic. All right, I'm going to give the topic a subject name. And in this case, I'm going to just call it test for the purposes of this tutorial. Now, if you'll notice, first thing you'll notice is that we have the more typical text editor icons available to us. And if we look across the top, we see that we can change our text to bold, we can change our text to italic, underscore it, and a bunch of others. And I'll go over a few of these, the more common ones that you'll be using. Okay. So this is an example of bold text. Okay. This one is italics, and here is a list. Item 1, number 2, third item. Okay, so we're going to start off with this, and as you can see, if we leave it like this, all we're going to get is just straight text. But what we want to do is we want to make it a little bit more interesting. So we need to highlight whatever it is that we want to modify. All right, in this case, where I'm just going to take the bold text, I'm going to highlight it. Then if I go up to the editor bar and I just click on bold text, the one thing you're going to notice right off the bat is when you hover over the icon, it's going to give you an example of what you need to do, and also an example of what the shortcode looks like, so that eventually, once you start learning some of these shortcodes, you can just type them as you're typing away. You don't even have to stop, highlight, click. Okay, so in this case, we're going with the bold text, and it says open code with the square brackets B, just like we showed you in the example. But here I'm just going to go ahead and click on the letter B, and it's going to insert the shortcode on both sides of our bold text. We can do the same thing with the italics. Just highlight the section we want in italics, hover over here and click. All right. The list is going to be a little bit different. All right. It can be a little bit more complex. I'm going to go ahead, and if I highlight my entire list and then click on the first one here where it says list, and it shows kind of like the bullet points, it's going to enclose that whole thing in a list format. All right. But this is one of those special cases where we actually have to go in and do a little bit more formatting. I'll show you. So if I go here and I click on preview, you're going to notice that it created that whole block of list items as one single item. All right, because we did not specify any breaks within our list items. So that's what we're going to do. So after my list, I'm going to go ahead and insert a carriage return. And if you notice, the first list here is a bulleted list. The second one is an ordered list, and you can use numbers or letters. All right, and if you take a close look at the descriptor, it says example list equals 1. All right, so that will be a numerical list, or list equals A, which would create an alphabet-based list. Okay, and it shows you where it says list equals 1, list equals A. All right, and then the third one, you're going to see it says list item. List item is just an asterisk in the square brackets, so I go ahead and click on that. Go to my second line, beginning of the line, click on that. Go to the beginning of my third line, click on that. Now I have all three items properly identified as list items, and if I hit the preview button, you can see now I have 3 items. All right. You can also see that my example of bold and my example of italics are also been properly rendered. All right. So that's how you use most of the standard BB code. There are a few exceptions that you need to be aware of. All right. If you want to embed a video, we have 2 formats. One is you can click on the YouTube, all right, and it's going to give you the shortcode for YouTube, and all you have to do is type in the URL. You can copy and paste it in from your YouTube account. Type in the shortcode or the URL in between the shortcodes, and it's going to do all the rendering for you. Okay, and it's going to set up in a very specific format with a small user-friendly size for the forum. The other one, which tends to be a little bit better, also does the exact same thing, is the embed any video. And you can see that it's got the icon with the circle with the little play button. If you click on that, it's actually going to pull up a dialog box, and all you have to do is fill this out, where it's coming from. All right. Typically, most people are going to be posting from YouTube. That seems to be the standard one. And then you would put in, again, copy and paste in the URL right into the URL dialog box, and then you can set the video width and height. This is a set preset, meaning that it will render it at a specific size within the post. Obviously, you don't want to go too large, but we do have some presets all the way up to full HD, which is not recommended. You want it to flow nicely in line, so we usually say just stick to the 560x315, which is the default if you click on YouTube. Okay. We also have a few others here. We can take a section and we can create a heading. Now, a heading, most people who understand HTML code would say, well, that's one of the H codes, H1, H2, H3, H4, and so on. This one, it is kind of like that, except this one allows you to designate a specific color for it. So it's basically an H1 heading that you can colorize. So the way you do it, you click here, and you have to manually enter the equals. Let's call it red. All right, and then when we preview it, you'll see that it renders it as a bold heading changed to red. Okay. By default, if you don't designate some color, it's just going to look a little off. Let me just remove that and show you what it looks like. So if you preview it, you're going to see that it's displaying the short code in there because the forum doesn't understand it. It just thinks that that's what you're writing. It's not going to convert it to anything. So you have to make sure that you put in the qualifier. Okay. We also have a few great little special effects. You can create a glow around text. You can add drop shadows. You can blur text. And we also have a few others where you can create spoilers. And this is another nice one. So if you want to hide a specific answer to a question, let the reader answer the questions for themselves before they look into it. All right, for example, what is 2 plus 2? All right, oh, I can spell. The answer, of course, is 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the 4 and we're going to place it into the spoiler. Okay. Now, when we render that, click on preview, you're going to see here's a question, what is 2 plus 2? And because you cannot see the answer, it allows you to say, well, I think it's 5. And then you click on it and it says, oh, darn, it's 4. Okay. So you can use that for very specific effects, especially if you're doing tutorials or how-tos or things like that. And another one that tends to be used a lot without you even realizing it is every time you quote somebody's post, it's going to enclose it into a quote. So let's take that whole thing, or actually let's let's put this first line into a quote. Quote is right up here. All right. Quote text. Okay. And what that does is it offsets the text, letting you know that you are actually quoting somebody else. Okay, so that's a great way of, if you want to refer to something you read earlier, you can quote it. The way the forum uses it would be with the, uh, again, with the equal sign, and it would be, in what the forum does is it uses the poster's name and then references what post the quote came from. So it'll have the actual post number. In your case, you don't need to. You just put in the person you are looking to quote and you preview it, and you'll see there, Duck wrote, this is an example of bold text. So this is a great way of being able to quote somebody and giving them the proper notification. All right, so anyhow, this is pretty much introduction to BBCode. Feel free to play around with any of these. You can highlight, you can float text to the left or the right of an image. You can create bold headings. We only have H1 and H2 available. And then the last three are tend to be a little bit more obscure. Anchor and go to tends to be for somebody who's writing very long tutorials. They can put links that refer back to previous sections. It takes a little getting used to, but if you're familiar with HTML code and anchors, that should be no problem. And of course, you can create a thumbnail from your image of a in this case, it'll be 300 pixels wide. All right, so I hope that that gives you a little bit of an understanding. Feel free to play around with it. I'd love to get your feedback. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything that we discuss, just reach out to me and I'll try to help you out. And best of luck. Thank you.